The envelope trembled in my hands as I read the words for the third time, hoping they might somehow change. They didn't. The bank's letterhead stared back at me, cold and official, informing me that we were $5,000 behind on our mortgage payments. $5,000. My stomach twisted into a knot as I realized we were one step away from losing our home. This has to be a mistake, I whispered to the empty elevator as it carried me up to our apartment. Olivia and I had never missed a payment. We'd been careful, responsible. Or so I thought. The familiar scent of garlic and herbs greeted me as I opened our front door. Olivia was in the kitchen, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, humming along to music as she stirred something on the stove. For a brief moment, watching her there in our cozy kitchen, everything felt normal. "Hey honey," she called out, her smile bright as she turned to me. "Dinner's almost ready. I'm trying that new pasta recipe from—" She stopped mid-sentence, her expression changing as she saw my face. "Mark? What's wrong?" I couldn't even speak. I just held out the letter. Olivia wiped her hands on a dish towel and took the paper from me. I watched her eyes scan the page, her brow furrowing. "This has to be a mistake," she said, echoing my earlier thoughts. "I've made every payment on time from our joint account. Every single one." That's what I thought too. I moved to the kitchen counter and set down my bag. "But the bank says we haven't made a full payment in 3 months. Olivia shook her head vigorously. "No, that's impossible. I've been handling the bills like I always do. Something's wrong here." There was a touch of defensiveness in her voice that made something cold settle in my chest. We'd been married for 7 years and I knew her tells. The slight flush creeping up her neck, the way her fingers fidgeted with her wedding ring. "Let's check the bank statements," I suggested, trying to keep my voice even. Maybe there was some kind of mix-up. 20 minutes later, we sat at our dining table, the pasta going cold on the stove, printouts of our bank statements spread between us. The evidence was undeniable. Large cash withdrawals consistently throughout the past few months. Money that should have gone to our mortgage. "I can explain," Olivia said quickly, her voice higher than usual. "My mom needed help with her medical bills. Remember I told you about her arthritis getting worse? And then my car needed that transmission repair. And there were some unexpected medical expenses for me too. Women's health stuff." She looked away when she said the last part. I wanted to believe her. I really did. 7 years together meant something. But the amounts didn't add up, and the timing of the withdrawals coincided perfectly with our missing mortgage payments. "Why didn't you tell me we were struggling?" I asked, fighting to keep the hurt from my voice. "We could have figured something out together." Olivia reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm felt clammy against mine. "I didn't want to worry you. You've been so stressed at work and I thought I could handle it. I was going to fix it before you ever found out." I looked into her eyes, searching for the truth. Part of me wanted to dig deeper, to demand more answers. But another part, the part that remembered our vows and all the good years, chose trust. "We'll have to make some serious changes," I said finally. "No more eating out. We'll have to cancel our vacation plans. Maybe sell the second car." Olivia nodded eagerly. "Of course. Whatever it takes. We'll fix this together, I promise." She came around the table and wrapped her arms around me. "We're a team, right?" "Right," I said, returning her embrace even as doubt nibbled at the edges of my mind. A team. That night, while Olivia slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. To cover the mortgage deficit, I'd need to take on extra work. Maybe evening shifts at my friend's bar or weekend gigs. We'd pull through this temporary setback. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't a setback at all. It was just the first thread pulled in a tapestry of lies that was about to unravel my entire life. A month into our new austerity measures, as Olivia jokingly called them, I was running on fumes. Days at my regular job in marketing, evenings tending bar at my college buddy Jason's place. The constant work left little time for sleep, much less for questioning the subtle inconsistencies in Olivia's behavior. She'd been supportive on the surface, packing lunches for me, cutting coupons, talking about our temporary sacrifice. Yet something felt off. The way she'd changed the subject when I asked about specific expenses. The mysterious errands that took hours longer than they should have. One Tuesday night at the bar, I was wiping down the counter after a slow shift when Jason slid his phone across to me. "Isn't this your wife's bracelet? The one with the little silver charms?" My eyes focused on the Instagram photo. A woman's hand resting on a white tablecloth, a glass of what looked like expensive champagne in the frame. Around her wrist was indeed a distinctive silver charm bracelet, the anniversary gift I'd saved for months to buy Olivia last year. "Where'd you find this?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the sudden tightness in my chest. My girlfriend follows this lifestyle blogger. She recognized you from the pictures in my office and thought it might be your wife. I read the caption, "Life's too short to deny yourself little luxuries #luxury dinner." The post was dated 3 days ago, when Olivia told me she was having soup at her sister's apartment. Could be someone with a similar bracelet, I said, but the unique arrangement of charms was unmistakable. Still, I needed more before jumping to conclusions. What's the account name? I asked. Luxury Life, Jason replied. Private account, but Melissa already follows her. Later that night, after my shift, I sat in my car, heart pounding as I created a blank Instagram account. I followed the mysterious profile using a random name, not expecting immediate approval. To my surprise, access was granted within minutes. Apparently, Olivia wasn't being very selective with her audience. With each scroll, my world cracked further. Post after post revealed a life I didn't recognize, one of luxury restaurants, designer handbags, and spa treatments. All dated during our supposed financial crisis. All while I was working double shifts to keep our home. My hands shook when I came across a photo that shattered any remaining doubt. Olivia and her mother Carolyn, champagne glasses raised, reclining in what were unmistakably first-class airplane seats. The caption read, #Miami Weekend Getaway with my favorite partner in crime. The timestamp, last weekend. When she told me she was helping her aunt with home repairs. I sat in my car until dawn, scrolling through 2 separate lives, the one I believed we shared and the one Olivia had been living behind my back. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. As soon as Olivia left for her part-time job at the boutique downtown, I began my investigation. Our shared laptop revealed a password-protected folder labeled Tax Documents. The password wasn't hard to guess, her childhood cat's name plus her birth year, the same combination she used for everything secure. Inside wasn't tax information but meticulously organized records of her spending. The joint bank accounts showed regular cash withdrawals, always just under $1,000, a threshold I later learned banks don't typically flag for suspicious activity. The total over 6 months, nearly $20,000. In our bedroom closet, behind her winter boots, I found a shoebox containing receipts from luxury stores and a statement for a premium credit card I never knew existed. One opened in my name as an additional card to our joint account. When I called the bank, they confirmed the card had been activated 6 months ago using my social security number and mother's maiden name. "We sent the confirmation to your home address, sir," the representative said. The welcome packet would have required a signature. Olivia must have intercepted it. In her yoga bag hidden in a zipped inner pocket, I found a second phone, sleek, new and password protected. I didn't need to unlock it. The notifications on the screen told enough of the story. Credit card alerts, Instagram messages, and appointment confirmation for a spa in South Beach. With shaking hands, I dialed Carolyn's number, concocting a story about planning a surprise for Olivia. Her mother took the bait immediately. "Oh Mark, how thoughtful. Was it as wonderful as our Miami trip? Olivia mentioned you might be joining us next time. And do thank her again for introducing me to Rick. His yacht party was simply divine." I thanked her politely, ended the call, and methodically documented everything. Screenshots, receipts, recorded phone conversations. Evidence of a betrayal so calculated it left me breathless. By evening, I had assembled a clear picture of an elaborate deception. My wife and mother-in-law hadn't just been spending beyond our means. They'd been systematically draining our accounts while forcing me to work myself to exhaustion to cover their luxury lifestyle. What I didn't yet understand was why, and how deep this rabbit hole went. I was about to find out. I took another day off work, sick days I could ill afford but desperately needed. With Olivia at her supposedly part-time job, I had the apartment to myself. The morning light streamed through our living room windows as I spread my findings across the coffee table, creating a visual map of deception. Bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots of Olivia's secret Instagram, they told a damning story, but I sensed there was more. My marketing background had taught me to look for patterns, to follow money trails. Something whispered that this wasn't just reckless spending, it was too organized, too methodical. I started with our banking records. After logging into our joint accounts online, I downloaded the complete transaction history for the past year. The pattern became clear. Olivia had gradually increased the cash withdrawals, starting with small amounts that grew larger over time, like a predator testing its prey's awareness. $20,000, I whispered, tallying the total. Nearly half of what I made in a year. Gone. Next, I called the credit card company posing as myself, which I technically was, and requested detailed statements for the card I never knew existed. The customer service representative was hesitant until I verified my identity with my social security number and mother's maiden name, information Olivia had used to open the card initially. I'm sending those statements to your email now, Mr. Donovan. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Yes, I said, an idea forming. Could you tell me if there are any authorized users on this account besides myself? Just one additional user, Carolyn Walsh. My mother-in-law. My hands clenched involuntarily. When the statements arrived, they revealed first-class flights to Miami, luxury hotel charges, restaurant bills exceeding $400 per meal. I tallied these expenses separately, adding them to my growing evidence file. My next step was riskier. While Olivia was showering that evening, I used her fingerprint to unlock her primary phone, a breach of privacy I would have once considered unthinkable. But the rules had changed. Her email contained the clues I needed. In a folder labeled Family Matters, I found correspondence between Olivia and Carolyn spanning months. I took screenshots, forwarded key emails to myself, then carefully marked all as unread. One email from 3 months ago made my blood run cold. Darling, men are walking wallets on legs. We deserve the beautiful life and they're obligated to provide it. Your father never understood my needs. Thank goodness you married someone more financially promising. Olivia had replied, learn from the master. He doesn't even notice as I gradually increased the loan. Too busy working to check the accounts. They've been laughing at me. Planning together. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. That night, I contacted an old college friend who had become a police detective. We met at a diner far from my neighborhood. Ryan, speaking hypothetically, what would this situation be called in legal terms? He studied the sanitized evidence I'd brought, names and account numbers redacted. Hypothetically. Ryan sipped his coffee, eyes serious. This has elements of identity theft, financial fraud, and potentially elder abuse if an older family member is involved unwillingly. And if the spouse did this? Legally complicated. Joint accounts mean shared access, but not carte blanche to drain funds or open unauthorized credit. The secret accounts, identity use, and systematic deception push this beyond normal marital dispute territory. He paused. Are you in trouble, Mark? Not me, I said quietly. But someone might be. The next day, I consulted with Barbara Chin, an attorney specializing in both family law and financial crimes. Her office was sparse, functional, no place for small talk. Based on what you've shown me, she said after reviewing my evidence, there's a strong case for financial fraud. Joint accounts don't give license for one spouse to systematically deplete shared assets, especially when hiding it from the other partner. What would you recommend? Document everything. Continue gathering evidence without alerting them. Don't confront until you have the complete picture. She leaned forward. And prepare yourself for what you might find. Financial deception like this rarely exists in isolation. I nodded, thinking of Carolyn's influence. I suspect there's more. There usually is. Barbara handed me her card. Call when you're ready to take action. These cases can get ugly fast. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mark, it's Alex from Meridian Financial Analysis. That favor you asked? Found something odd about small investment firm called LC Ventures. Call me SAP. I felt a chill despite the warm spring air. LC Ventures. Liv and Carolyn. The rabbit hole was about to get deeper. I met Alex at a coffee shop downtown, choosing a corner table where we wouldn't be overheard. He'd been my colleague at Meridian Financial before I moved to marketing, and his analytical skills were legendary. If anyone could unravel a financial mystery, it was him. Thanks for looking into this, I said, sliding a coffee toward him. Don't thank me yet. Alex opened his laptop. What I found isn't pretty. He turned the screen toward me, showing a series of transactions moving through various accounts before landing at an entity called LC Ventures. I tracked the money flow. Your joint accounts to a series of cash withdrawals, then deposits into Carolyn Walsh's personal account, then to this investment company. He pointed at the screen. LC Ventures is registered in Florida as a private investment firm. Guess who the owners are? My stomach tightened. Liv and Carolyn. Bingo. Incorporation papers list Carolyn Walsh and Olivia Donovan as equal partners. Alex scrolled to another document. And here's where it gets interesting. LC Ventures purchased a property in Miami 3 months ago. He showed me a real estate listing for a waterfront condominium valued at $400,000. The down payment was $80,000, Alex continued. I traced it back through a maze of transfers, but the origin point was your joint savings account. The room seemed to tilt slightly. $80,000. Our entire emergency fund plus what should have gone to our mortgage. They bought property with my money, I said, more to myself than to Alex. While I'm working double shifts to cover bills they deliberately left unpaid. Alex nodded grimly. This isn't impulsive shopping or secret luxury spending. This is calculated financial fraud. They've been systematically moving your shared assets into a vehicle you have no access to. Can I prove it's my money? With forensic accounting, yes. It'll be complex, but the trail exists. He hesitated. Mark, this goes beyond marriage problems. You need serious legal help. After thanking Alex, I called Barbara Chen and scheduled an emergency appointment. Within hours, I was back in her Stark office, showing her the new evidence. This changes things, she said, examining the documents. We're not just talking about unauthorized spending. This is deliberate concealment of marital assets. What does that mean legally? It means they've violated fiduciary duty to you as a spouse. In a divorce, courts take a very dim view of hiding assets. She leaned back. But more importantly, the deliberate scheme to divert funds, establish a business entity, and purchase property without your knowledge or consent crosses into potential criminal territory. What should I do now? Barbara outlined a strategy. Continue gathering evidence, prepare formal complaints, and get ready for both divorce proceedings and potential criminal charges. Don't confront them yet, she warned. We need the complete picture first. That evening, I returned home to find Olivia in the kitchen, preparing what smelled like an expensive cut of meat. How many extra shifts had that cost me? You're home early, she said, kissing my cheek as if everything was normal. Rough day? You look tired. Just a lot on my mind, I replied, amazed at how easily the casual lie came now. Work stuff. Poor baby. She squeezed my shoulder. Hey, good news. I managed to find some extra cash in my personal account to put toward the mortgage. Not much, but every bit helps, right? The performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed her, the caring wife making sacrifices alongside me. The injustice of it made me physically ill. That's great, I managed. Every bit helps. Later I checked our mortgage account. She had indeed made a payment, $500. A token amount, probably intended to keep the bank from sending more notices that might alert me. Meanwhile, LC Ventures owned a waterfront property purchased with our life savings. That night, while Olivia slept, I slipped out of bed and used her laptop one more time. In her email, I found correspondence with a real estate agent in Miami about investment property options, dating back nearly a year. This wasn't a recent scheme. They'd been planning it while I believed we were saving for our future together. More disturbing was an email exchange with Carolyn discussing Operation Relocation, plans for Olivia to gradually move her personal belongings to Miami without arousing my suspicion. The truth hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just stealing my money, she was preparing to leave me once the theft was complete. I'd be left with the debts while she started fresh in Miami with our savings. As I stared at the ceiling that night, a cold determination replaced my hurt. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. And I knew exactly how I would get it. My brother David's birthday arrived 2 weeks after I discovered the Miami property. During that time, I'd continued gathering evidence while maintaining a facade of normalcy with Olivia. Each "I love you" she offered felt like sandpaper on my skin, but I smiled through it, knowing what was coming. Do we really need to go to David's birthday dinner? Olivia asked that morning, lounging in bed while I dressed. With our financial situation, spending money at a restaurant seems irresponsible. The audacity nearly made me laugh. Instead, I adjusted my tie and turned to her with a smile. It's important to me. Besides, Mom and Dad are paying. I paused, then added the bait. I've actually invited your mother too. Olivia sat up, suddenly alert. You invited Mom? Why? I thought it would be nice. We need family support during tough times like these. I kept my voice even. Is that a problem? No problem, she said quickly. That's thoughtful of you. I watched her send a quick text, undoubtedly warning Carolyn to stick to their story. The restaurant was one of those upscale steak places with private rooms for special occasions. I'd worked with David and the manager to prepare everything, including the surprise presentation I'd mentioned for the birthday boy. When we arrived, everyone was already seated. My parents, David and his wife Emily, two close family friends, and Carolyn, who greeted me with a hug that made my skin crawl. "Mark, darling. So wonderful to see you," she gushed. "Olivia tells me you've been working so hard lately. Such a dedicated provider." I noticed how she emphasized the word provider while avoiding any mention of their recent Miami trip. Throughout the appetizers, Olivia played her part perfectly, the loving, attentive wife, her hand occasionally resting on mine, laughing at all the right moments. Carolyn, meanwhile, dominated the conversation with tales of economic hardship. "It's just so difficult for young couples these days," she lamented, sipping her third glass of expensive wine. "The cost of everything is outrageous. When Harold and I were starting out, a house cost practically nothing." My father, a retired accountant, nodded politely but caught my eye across the table. He'd always seen through Carolyn's act. As the main course was cleared, the server brought in a bottle of champagne. The moment had arrived. "Before we have dessert," I said, standing and raising my glass, "I'd like to propose a toast." Everyone quieted, smiles expectant. Olivia beamed up at me, clearly relieved that the evening was going smoothly. "First to my brother David. Happy birthday, man." I nodded to him. "But I'd also like to toast to something else that's important to all of us: honesty in relationships and financial transparency in marriage." A flicker of alarm crossed Olivia's face. "The manager has set up the projector for my presentation," I continued. "I prepared something special." The lights dimmed and the screen lowered from the ceiling. Olivia tensed beside me as the first slide appeared: "Financial infidelity, a case study." "What is this?" she whispered. I ignored her and continued addressing the room. "I've recently become interested in how couples handle their finances. Specifically, what happens when one partner systematically deceives the other." The next slide showed screenshots from live_luxury_life's Instagram. Olivia in expensive restaurants, shopping sprees, spa days. All time-stamped during our supposed financial crisis. "This is my wife's secret social media account," I explained calmly. "Created to document a lifestyle she told me we couldn't afford." The room fell silent. Carolyn's face hardened while Olivia's drained of color. "Mark, stop this right now," Olivia hissed, grabbing my arm. But I was already advancing to the next slides. Bank statements, credit card bills, the trail of money leading to LC Ventures, and finally photos of the Miami condominium. This property was purchased 3 months ago by LC Ventures, a company owned by my wife and mother-in-law, using $80,000 from our joint savings. All while I worked 2 jobs to cover the mortgage they deliberately left unpaid. My father leaned forward, his accountant's mind quickly processing the implications. "This is outright fraud," he murmured. Emily, David's wife and a corporate attorney, whispered something to him that included the phrase "criminal charges." Olivia stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "I was going to surprise you with an investment property. A gift." "A gift?" I laughed without humor. "That's why you were planning to leave me? Operation Relocation, right?" Carolyn slammed her hand on the table. "You had no right to go through her private communications. And you had no right to steal my money," I countered. "They won't jail us for this, you idiot." Carolyn snapped, her composure finally cracking. The silence that followed was deafening. In her rage, she confirmed everything in front of 6 witnesses. Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she realized what had happened. Her fortress of lies had crumbled in minutes, and her own mother had delivered the final blow. "We're leaving," Carolyn announced, grabbing her purse. "Actually," David said, standing, "I think you both should stay. The police detective is just outside. He'd like to ask you some questions." The days following David's birthday dinner unfolded like scenes from a legal drama. Detective Ryan Morris, my college friend who had been waiting discreetly at the restaurant, took initial statements from everyone present. Olivia and Carolyn left in separate police cars, not for arrest but for formal questioning. I spent the following morning in Barbara Chen's office, finalizing the official complaint. "The evidence is substantial," Barbara said, organizing the files into a thick binder. "Financial fraud, identity theft, and deliberate concealment of marital assets. The detective thinks there's enough here for criminal charges alongside the civil case." "What happens next?" I asked. "We've filed the divorce petition with the financial audit request. That freezes most assets immediately." She tapped her pen on the desk. "Meanwhile, the police investigation continues. They've obtained warrants to search both your home and Carolyn's residence." Later that day, I stood in our apartment watching officers in plain clothes methodically going through Olivia's belongings. They found 3 more credit cards in my name I hadn't known about, a folder of luxury purchase receipts hidden in a hollowed-out book, and a handwritten journal documenting their scheme. "This is quite sophisticated," the female detective commented, bagging the journal as evidence. "Most people who commit financial fraud aren't this organized." "She learned from the best," I replied, thinking of Carolyn. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Olivia. We need to talk. Please." I showed it to the detective, who advised me not to respond. The next day, I received formal notice that Olivia had filed for divorce herself, attempting to beat me to it. Her petition requested an immediate division of assets, a transparent attempt to claim her share before the fraud investigation could impact the proceedings. Barbara filed our counterpetition demanding a complete financial audit. "She's panicking," Barbara explained. "Her attorney must know this looks bad." A week later, officers executed a search warrant at Carolyn's home. Ryan called me afterward. "We found documents suggesting this isn't their first rodeo," he said. There were files about other financial schemes, including what looks like tax evasion going back years. "Anything about Carolyn's ex-husbands?" "Several folders. One labeled Harold Settlements contained records of hidden accounts and property transfers before their divorce. We're contacting him for a statement." Meanwhile, Olivia and Carolyn were trying desperately to offload the Miami condo. My lawyer petitioned the court for an emergency injunction, which a judge granted within hours. The property and all accounts belonging to LC Ventures were frozen pending investigation. 3 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, I received a call from the district attorney's office requesting a meeting. In a sterile conference room downtown, Assistant DA Sarah Mendez explained the situation. "We're preparing charges against both Carolyn Walsh and Olivia Donovan," she said. "The evidence indicates a pattern of fraud, with your case being the most recent example." She laid out the potential charges: wire fraud, financial exploitation, identity theft, and conspiracy. The maximum penalties could result in substantial prison time, particularly for Carolyn with her history. "We've approached Ms. Donovan about a cooperation agreement," Mendez continued. "Her testimony against her mother would significantly strengthen our case against the apparent ringleader." "And what does Olivia get in return?" I asked. "Reduced charges, possibly probation instead of jail time. But she'd still face civil penalties and restitution orders." Mendez's expression was sympathetic but firm. "She'd need to make a full confession and return all misappropriated funds." 2 days later, I learned that Olivia had accepted the deal. Through Barbara, I received a message that Olivia wanted to meet. "Absolutely not," I told Barbara over the phone. "It might actually help your case," she countered. "If she admits everything to you directly, it strengthens both the divorce settlement and the restitution claims." Reluctantly, I agreed to a meeting at Barbara's office with attorneys present. When Olivia entered, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. She looked smaller somehow, dressed in plain slacks and a simple blouse, dark circles under her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice hoarse. I nodded but said nothing. "I've agreed to testify against my mother," she continued. "I'm giving a full statement about everything, the accounts, the property, all of it." She pushed a folder across the table. "This is a complete accounting of all the money I took and where it went. I've also signed papers authorizing the sale of my stake in the condo, with all proceeds to go to you." "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I was wrong. Because I let my mother convince me that what we were doing was justified. Because—" She looked down at her hands. "Because I destroyed something good for something meaningless." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, not even anger anymore. Just emptiness. "It's too late for apologies," I said quietly. "I know," she whispered. "I just wanted you to hear the truth from me. All of it. Before the courts do." The local newspaper ran the story a month after Olivia's confession. Mother-daughter financial fraud duo faces multiple charges. The article detailed how Carolyn Walsh and her daughter Olivia Donovan had systematically defrauded me, along with evidence suggesting Carolyn had done the same to previous husbands. Overnight, their scheme became public knowledge and the fallout was swift. I'd avoided social media since the exposure, but Barbara forwarded me relevant updates. Olivia's luxury lifestyle account had been deleted, replaced by silence. Her circle of friends, many of whom had admired and envied her apparent wealth, began distancing themselves publicly. Former colleagues posted vague statements about being shocked and never suspecting what was happening. More significantly, other victims began to emerge. "Mr. Donovan?" The voice on the phone was gravelly tired. "My name is Lawrence Peterson. I was Carolyn's second husband, around 15 years ago. We met at a quiet diner outside the city." Lawrence was in his 60s, silver-haired but still fit, with the watchful eyes of someone who'd learned caution the hard way. "When I saw the news, it was like reading my own story," he explained, stirring his coffee absently. "The systematic withdrawals, the hidden accounts, the constant lies about where the money was going. Carolyn took me for nearly $200,000 before I caught on." "Did you press charges?" I asked. He shook his head. "I was too embarrassed. Too ashamed of being fooled. I just wanted the divorce done quickly to move on." His eyes met mine. "That was a mistake. If I'd fought then, maybe she wouldn't have been able to do this to you or others." Lawrence wasn't alone. Through Barbara, I learned that 4 more men had contacted the district attorney's office, all with similar stories about Carolyn. 2 had been romantically involved with her, while 2 others were business partners. Each described elaborate schemes to extract and hide money. Meanwhile, the prosecution's case was strengthening, particularly after Olivia's cooperation. In exchange for her testimony, she received a plea deal: 2 years probation, financial restitution, and community service. Carolyn, facing much more serious charges and without a cooperation agreement, was looking at potential prison time. The preliminary hearing revealed the full extent of Carolyn's operation. The prosecutor presented evidence that she had coached not only Olivia but 2 other women in similar schemes, positioning herself as a financial freedom mentor for women in marriages she deemed financially advantageous. The defendant didn't just commit fraud, the prosecutor told the judge. She created a systematic method for it and recruited others, including her own daughter. Carolyn maintained her innocence, claiming she had simply been helping her daughter with investment opportunities. Her expensive defense attorney argued that joint marital assets were legally accessible to both spouses, and that no crime had occurred, just unfortunate financial misunderstandings in a troubled marriage. The judge wasn't convinced. The case was bound over for trial, with Carolyn released on a substantial bail her attorney paid. 3 days later, I received an urgent call from Detective Morris. "We've got a problem," he said. "Carolyn and her attorney tried to access the Miami condo yesterday. When they couldn't get in because of the court order, they attempted to contact a real estate agent to list it anyway. Can they do that?" "No, which is why I'm calling. We've filed additional charges for attempting to dispose of evidence and violate a court order. But there's more. We have reason to believe she's liquidating other hidden assets. We've issued new search warrants." The next revelation came from an unexpected source. One morning, Barbara called with news that Olivia had turned over her mother's personal journals to the prosecution. "She found them hidden in a storage unit Carolyn rented," Barbara explained. "They detail every scheme going back 20 years, including explicit instructions on how to manipulate men for financial gain. It's disturbing reading." "Why would Olivia do this?" I asked. "She already has her plea deal. According to the prosecutor, Carolyn has been threatening her, claiming Olivia will pay for betraying her mother. Apparently, Olivia is genuinely afraid of what Carolyn might do." The final break between mother and daughter occurred during a pretrial hearing. I was present in the courtroom when it happened. Olivia had just finished testifying about their joint schemes when Carolyn's attorney began cross-examination. "Isn't it true," the attorney asked, "that this entire scheme was your idea, and that you manipulated your mother into helping you?" Before Olivia could answer, Carolyn stood up. "You ungrateful little traitor," she hissed loud enough for everyone to hear. "After everything I taught you, this is how you repay me?" The judge ordered her to sit down, but the damage was done. Her outburst had undermined her entire defense. After court adjourned, I watched from a distance as Olivia tried to approach her mother in the hallway. Carolyn turned her back, saying loudly, "I have no daughter." In that moment, I saw on Olivia's face the realization of what she had truly lost by following her mother's twisted guidance. Not just her marriage and reputation, but the toxic relationship she had sacrificed everything to maintain. 6 months after the courtroom confrontation between Olivia and Carolyn, I stood in the empty living room of my new house, listening to the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors. Sunlight streamed through windows that needed no designer curtains. The space was modest compared to our old apartment, a small 2-bedroom bungalow in Portland, 3 hours from my previous life, but it was mine, purchased with the restitution money and free from the weight of deception. The divorce had been finalized 2 months earlier. Despite her attorney's efforts, Olivia was entitled to almost nothing after the financial fraud evidence was presented. The judge had been unusually decisive. This court cannot reward systematic deception and criminal misuse of marital assets. Carolyn's trial had concluded with a 5-year prison sentence and a staggering fine of $500,000. She'd wept dramatically during sentencing, claiming poor health and throwing herself on the mercy of the court. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and penetrating eyes, had been unmoved. "Ms. Walsh, you have demonstrated not only a disregard for the law but a calculated pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades. Your victims deserve justice." As for the Miami condominium, it had been sold at auction, the proceeds split between restitution payments to me and the other victims who had come forward. LC Ventures was dissolved, its assets liquidated under court supervision. I placed a box labeled "Kitchen" on the counter and opened the back door, whistling softly. A yellow Labrador bounded in from the small backyard, tail wagging furiously. "Come here, Fortune," I called, scratching behind her ears as she pressed against my legs. The shelter had named her before I adopted her, and the irony was too perfect to change. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "How's the new place? Mom wants to know if you need help unpacking." I smiled, typing back, "All good. Tell her I've got it under control." Dinner Friday? My relationship with my family had deepened through the ordeal. David had been my rock, helping me navigate the darkest moments of the investigation and court proceedings. My parents had opened their home to me during the months when I couldn't bear to return to the apartment I'd shared with Olivia. The doorbell rang and Fortune barked once before racing to the front door. "Coming?" I called, navigating around boxes. On the porch stood a woman with short dark hair and glasses, holding a small potted plant. My new neighbor from across the street, who had introduced herself when I was unloading the moving truck yesterday. "Sophie, right?" I said, opening the door wider. "Sophia," she corrected with a smile. "I thought you might like a housewarming gift. It's a peace lily, allegedly impossible to kill, even for people with no gardening skills." "Perfect for me then," I laughed, accepting the plant. "Would you like to come in? I can't offer much besides coffee in paper cups, but it's drinkable." As we sat on boxes in my half-furnished living room, Fortune resting her head on Sophia's knee, I found myself telling her about my job at the local marketing firm that had brought me to Portland. I carefully avoided mentioning anything about Olivia or the fraud case that had made regional news. "And what do you do?" I asked, steering the conversation away from my past. "I'm a forensic accountant," she replied. "I work with law firms to track financial fraud, mostly in corporate settings, but occasionally in divorce cases too." I nearly choked on my coffee. Of all the career coincidences, she misinterpreted my reaction. "I know it sounds boring to most people." "No, not at all," I said quickly. "It actually sounds fascinating. I have some experience with financial investigation myself." An understatement of epic proportions, but I wasn't ready to open that door yet. Later that evening, after Sophia had left and the essential unpacking was done, I sat on my new back porch with Fortune at my feet. My laptop was open to a blog post I'd been working on for weeks: Financial Infidelity, Warning Signs and Protection Strategies. What had begun as personal therapy, writing about my experience, had evolved into something more purposeful. Working with Barbara and several of Carolyn's other victims, I'd established a small foundation to educate people about financial abuse in relationships. We offered resources, support groups, and legal referrals to those experiencing similar situations. Next week, I was scheduled to speak at a community college about recognizing signs of financial manipulation. The thought of standing in front of strangers sharing my story still made my palms sweat. But if it helped even one person avoid what I'd experienced, it would be worth the discomfort. My phone chimed with an email notification, a message from Lawrence Peterson with the subject line, "Another one." He'd become something of a mentor during the past months, sharing his own healing journey decades after Carolyn's manipulation. The email contained a link to a podcast called Financial Clarity with a note: "They're looking for guests. Your story needs to be heard." I looked up at the evening sky, feeling something I hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of purpose rising from the ashes of betrayal. Fortune nuzzled my hand and I scratched her ears absently, thinking that sometimes the universe had strange ways of setting us on unexpected paths. Tomorrow I would call the podcast host. Tonight I would finish unpacking my kitchen. One box at a time. One day at a time. Building a new life with hard-earned wisdom and, surprisingly, a measure of gratitude for the lessons learned through pain. A year after moving to Portland, I received a court summons to appear as a witness in the final proceedings against Carolyn. Despite multiple appeals, her conviction had been upheld, and this hearing would address additional restitution claims from victims who had come forward after the initial trial. I hadn't set foot in my former city since leaving. Now, as I checked into a downtown hotel the night before the hearing, memories flooded back, some painful, others strangely distant, as though they belonged to someone else. In many ways they did. I was no longer the same man who had discovered that bank letter 18 months ago. The courthouse hadn't changed. Same imposing columns, same security line, same uncomfortable wooden benches in the hallway. I arrived early, hoping to speak with the prosecutor before the proceedings began. As I rounded the corner toward the courtroom, I stopped short. Olivia stood near a water fountain, dressed in a simple navy blue dress with a white collar, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Gone were the designer accessories and perfect makeup that had once been her armor. She looked smaller somehow, diminished yet more real. She saw me before I could retreat. Our eyes met across the polished floor, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she took a hesitant step forward. "Mark," she said, her voice barely audible. Could I have 5 minutes? Please?" My instinct was to refuse, to protect the peace I'd worked so hard to build. But something in her expression, a vulnerability I'd never seen during our marriage, made me nod. We found a small cafeteria on the first floor, nearly empty at this early hour. We sat at a corner table, 2 paper cups of mediocre coffee between us. "You look well," she said, fidgeting with her cup. "Healthy." "I am," I replied simply. "How are you?" She took a deep breath. Surviving. Working at a financial literacy center downtown. It's part of my community service, but I've actually asked to stay on after my hours are completed." A sad smile crossed her face. "Ironic, teaching others about responsible money management." "And your mother?" I asked, though I already knew from the court updates. "She refuses to see me. Returned all my letters unopened." Olivia's eyes dropped to her hands. "Her attorney told me she's written me out of her will. Not that there's anything left to inherit." I nodded, unsure what response she expected. Sympathy seemed inappropriate for the architect of her own downfall. "Mark," she began again, her voice trembling slightly. "I know this doesn't change anything. I know it's too late. But I need to tell you that I understand now what we did, was unforgivable." She wasn't crying, but her eyes shimmered. It wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal of trust, the manipulation, the lies. "I've had a lot of time to think about who I became and why." She swallowed hard. "The counseling I'm required to attend has helped me see how I used my mother's approval as an excuse for choices I made myself." I listened without interrupting, watching this woman I had once loved, once trusted, once built dreams with. The anger that had driven me for months after discovering her deception had gradually faded, replaced by something closer to pity. "Can you ever forgive me?" she finally asked. I considered the question carefully, wanting my answer to be honest. "Forgiveness isn't something I can give you like a gift, Olivia. It's something I've had to find for myself to move forward. The truth is, I've forgiven you not for your sake but for mine. Carrying that anger was only hurting me." She nodded, understanding passing across her face. "The worst punishment," I continued, "isn't legal penalties or public shame. It's having to live with yourself knowing what you've done. That reckoning happens privately, every day." "Yes," she whispered. "That's exactly it." When I stood to leave, she remained seated, looking up at me with a question she didn't voice. I answered it anyway. "I'm happy now, Olivia. I've built a good life. I hope you find a way to do the same." The courtroom was already filling when I arrived. I took my seat near the prosecutor's table, scanning the room out of habit. My testimony would be brief. The facts of my case had already been established in previous proceedings. When Carolyn was brought in, I barely recognized her. Prison had aged her dramatically, the arrogance drained from her posture. She didn't look at me once during the entire hearing. My testimony was clear and concise. I described the scheme, presented the timeline of discovery, and answered the judge's questions without emotion. When Carolyn was sentenced to additional restitution payments and her appeals were denied, I felt nothing but a quiet sense of justice served. Outside on the courthouse steps, I spotted Olivia standing alone, watching as Carolyn was led back to the prisoner transport vehicle. Our eyes met briefly across the distance. Then I turned away, walking toward the parking garage where my rental car waited. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "How did it go? Still meeting for dinner?" I smiled, typing back, "All done. On my way to the airport. See you tonight." As I drove away from the courthouse, I passed a familiar figure on the sidewalk. Olivia, head bowed, walking alone into an uncertain future. I felt a moment of recognition, not for her, but for the lesson she had inadvertently taught me, that trust, once broken, is rarely rebuilt, but a broken life always holds the possibility of reconstruction. In the rearview mirror, the courthouse grew smaller until it disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the road back to Portland, to Fortune waiting at the neighbor's house, to Sophia, to the speaking engagement scheduled for next week, to the life I'd built from the ruins of betrayal. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 2 years after the final hearing, I stood at the podium of a packed conference room in the Chicago Marriott, adjusting the microphone. The audience, financial advisors, counselors, and social workers, waited attentively as I prepared to deliver the keynote address at the Financial Abuse Recognition and Prevention Conference. "My name is Mark Donovan," I began, my voice steady. "3 years ago, I discovered that my wife and mother-in-law had systematically defrauded me of our life savings while orchestrating an elaborate plan to leave me financially ruined. A familiar story now, one I'd told dozens of times at seminars and support groups across the country. Each telling had become easier, the sharp edges of pain dulled by time and purpose. Today, I'm not here to dwell on betrayal, but to share what I've learned about prevention, recognition, and recovery." From the front row, Sophia smiled encouragingly. She'd taken a rare day off from her forensic accounting firm to support me. After the presentation, we planned to extend our stay for a mini vacation, our first since getting engaged 3 months ago. The gold band on her finger caught the light as she adjusted her glasses. Our relationship had evolved naturally, beginning as neighbors, becoming friends through dog walks and coffee conversations, and gradually deepening into something neither of us had been seeking but both had been ready to embrace. As I moved through my presentation, warning signs, protective measures, recovery strategies, I could see heads nodding in recognition. The questions afterward were thoughtful, specific, and sometimes painfully personal, asked by professionals who had witnessed the devastation financial abuse leaves in its wake. "How do you help someone who still doesn't recognize they're being manipulated?" asked a family counselor from Detroit. "Patience and evidence," I replied. "Financial abusers isolate their victims, make them doubt their perceptions. Breaking through that requires consistent support and irrefutable documentation." After the formal session ended, a man approximately my father's age approached, waiting until the others had dispersed. "Tom Walsh," he introduced himself, extending his hand. The surname hit me like a physical jolt. "Carolyn's first husband?" He nodded, a rueful smile crossing his weathered face. "The original victim, you might say. I read about your case when it made the papers. Followed the trial. I would have reached out sooner, but I needed to work through some things first." We found a quiet corner of the hotel bar, and over the next hour Tom shared his story, his whirlwind romance with Carolyn in the 80s, the gradual realization that money was disappearing, the gaslighting when he questioned expenses, and finally, the devastating discovery of systematic theft. "I never pressed charges," he admitted. "Too ashamed, too eager to put it behind me. Sometimes I wonder how many others might have been spared if I'd fought harder." He sipped his club soda. "That's why what you're doing matters so much. You're breaking the silence." "It wasn't courage," I confessed. "Just survival at first. The foundation came later." Tom shook his head. "Give yourself more credit. Most people bury these experiences." Before leaving, he pressed a business card into my hand. "I've rebuilt a good life. Started a new company, remarried to a wonderful woman who wouldn't know a designer bag if it hit her in the face." He laughed softly. "If your foundation ever needs a corporate donor or another speaker with gray hair and hard-won wisdom, call me." That evening, Sophia and I walked along Lake Michigan, Fortune trotting happily ahead on her leash. We'd brought her along on this trip, unwilling to leave our furry family member behind. "How are you feeling after meeting Tom?" Sophia asked, her arm linked through mine. "Strangely encouraged," I replied. "Seeing him, successful, happy, truly recovered after all these years, it confirms what I've been telling myself, that this chapter doesn't define my whole story." "It doesn't," she agreed. "Though I admit I'm selfishly glad it brought you to Portland. To my street. To my life." Later that night, as Sophia slept beside me, I checked my email one last time and found a message from Barbara Chin. The subject line read simply, "FY, the closure." The body contained a link to a news article about Olivia's community program for financial literacy, which had received recognition for its work with domestic violence survivors. The article included a quote from Olivia: "I've been on both sides of financial abuse, as perpetrator and, before that, as someone manipulated by a skilled abuser. Neither excuses the other, but understanding the cycle helps us break it." I closed the laptop without responding. Some communications needed no reply. Some circles completed themselves. In the darkness of the hotel room, with Fortune snoring softly from her bed on the floor and Sophia's gentle breathing beside me, I felt the final piece of a long journey falling into place. The foundation's work would continue, my new life with Sophia would unfold, and somewhere Olivia was finding her own path to redemption, separate from mine as it should be. Tomorrow we would visit the Art Institute, act like tourists, take silly photos and plan our wedding. Tomorrow belonged entirely to the future. Today at last I was completely free from the past.